As we approach the end of this school year, one issue that has occupied the headlines on these newscasts with increasing frequency is that of school closings and teacher terminations. Given the magnitude of the problem, WCCO Steve Johnson and photographer Doug Nemenick have produced a series of reports that have put the issue in perspective. We call the series Schools, a Space Oddity. Steve?
Dave, in preparing these reports, we discovered that through all of the facts and financing formulas in education, one fact emerged most frequently. It is that few issues have greater impact on more people than those concerning the education of children. Permanently closing schools in the face of declining enrollment has served to make that abundantly clear.
I'm not a teacher, and all I am is a parent. But all I want for my kids is the right to have an education.
That we see no other alternative than to recommend the swift and sure passage of a motion to close Fern Hill.
You continue to cut back in school programs, we're going to do a poorer job of educating the students of this state.
We had never experienced a decline mode in this country. Never. You know, our whole way of life is predicated on bigger and better. Growth, growth, growth. And we've always grown. And no one, psychologically, no one was ready.
In 5 years, half of the Minnesota counties will lose as much as 60% of the school-age population. It is an oversimplification, but most of the decline is occurring in the inner ring of suburbs, what has been the cradle for the post-war baby boom. We have built school after school here, expanded programs, developed the highest level of educational excellence, building for tomorrow. Tomorrow came, and what it brought was totally unforeseen.
It has staggered not only education, it has staggered our government. It staggered industry. I guess you could relate it to the energy crisis. That took us by surprise too, and it shouldn't have.
The numbers themselves are staggering. In the decade ending 1985, there will be 200,000 fewer students in our schools, 11,000 fewer teachers employed. And the most disturbing fact of all is that with the teachers go programs like language, art, and music.
Ready, steady. Okay, let's...
For 7 years, Paige Macklin has taught music at Richfield Central School. She is one of 1,000 Minnesota teachers put on unrequested leave this spring. Richfield Central is one of 24 schools in Minnesota that next year will be void of children's voices.
If a music program is primarily entertainment, then perhaps it's frivolous. Although, can you cut out, even if it is just fun singing, is that the kind of thing that we really want to cut out of our elementary schools entirely? I really see it as a dilemma. And with people objecting to paying high taxes and so on, I mean, I'm a homeowner too and a taxpayer, and I guess I can see that side of it. And a lot of families just plain not having children, and I don't know. It kind of scares me. Where is it heading? Being in the teaching profession and wanting to be in the teaching profession, it's scary.
The irony in all of this is that districts like Richfield, where enrollment decline is highest, are paying more to educate fewer students. The average teacher's salary in Richfield is the second highest in the state. More than 60% of its teachers are at maximum salary levels. They are the teachers with the most years of service. As a result, Richfield is in great financial difficulty, borrowing on its reserve funds to the limit and still falling behind.
They peaked out at 11,700 students in Richfield. And they have the decline now where it will come down to about 4,500 students. And if that's accurate, more than 70% of the homes in Richfield do not have children of school age in those homes. So how do you pass a referendum to get more money? It's not going to happen. So they can't get the money. So we're going to have to close schools.
In community after community, the doors of schools are being locked. It is without exception a painful, often divisive experience for the neighborhoods. It has made strangers of childhood friends and uprooted families. It is a hard pill for most parents to digest, but the legacy of the little red schoolhouse on the corner, upon which traditional education has been built, is crumbling under the weight of reality. And in tomorrow's report, we're going to focus on one school in one district, namely St. Louis Park, Dave, to show you the impact that a school closing has had on a neighborhood, more importantly on its people.
Good, thank you, Steve. We'll be back in just a moment with Ralph John Fritz. This year, more than ever, inflationary pressures and the phenomenon of declining enrollment have sent school districts statewide into a tailspin. WCCO reporter-producer Steve Johnson and photographer Doug Nemenuk have spent the past 6 weeks focusing on what the crisis has done to the neighborhoods. Here's part 2 of what we call Schools, a Space Oddity.
Dave, the greatest enrollment decline is occurring in what used to be the cradle of the post-war baby boom, that is, the inner ring of suburbs in the Twin Cities. These are the school districts that in the 50s and 60s were most attractive to new homeowners and parents. The best schools were there. In the late 70s, however, the story is a sharp contrast. Since midwinter, the headlines have been frequent and frightening. The sudden reality of school closings has struck home on the doorsteps of thousands in Twin City suburbs. In St. Louis Park, as in a dozen other school districts, the issue has driven a spike of animosity between neighborhoods, made enemies of friends, and threatened to uproot families. Try as parents must to temper the emotion with reason. When push comes to shove, anxiety surfaces and fevers run hot. And in every case, the slogan is the same: close theirs, not mine.
And I remind you that none of the 41 parents that are here were ever contacted that their children would be affected by that move. And I found that pitifully poor management in a school district this size. I feel if it was your child and you were led to believe that nothing was going to happen and went to register your little toddler down there and they told them, no, third school, try again, you'd be as upset as we are. We won't go away. We're not going to go away this time. You can't send us away and tell us to go sit down. We're here to stay. We recommend you close Fern Hill.
I knew 4 years ago I was told that Elliott School would be closed. Now, where was that parent? If I, sitting way over here, not even living in St. Louis Park, if I knew Elliott School was going to have to close, how could parents help but know that school? First of all, they didn't pay any attention 2, 3, 4 years ago. They only pay attention when it becomes dramatic.
When it's their school.
And it's their school, and it's final.
For more than half a century, Elliott School has supported the weight of this neighborhood's learning activity and growth. Many of these children's parents went to school here, so it was indeed a punishing blow to learn that something seemingly so sound, so permanent, so vital to the community fabric was about to become a hollow reminder of what education once was. For Ron and Sharon Guasden and their 2 kids, the loss of Elliott School has shattered their dreams of permanency.
We've been thinking about moving, and we were considering putting on an addition on the house, as a matter of fact, just recently, this spring. And the reason for not moving was because of across the street from the school.
As you can see, our house is facing the parking lot over at the school. So you see the teachers get in and out of the school on a nice day. You go out, hi, how are you? You know, and now that I work over there, they're part of my family. They're my neighbors.
Yeah.
And we really have a close feeling towards each other. Everybody wonders where everybody's going, what they're going to be doing. Nobody knows. The kids that they're going to school with are going to be split 3 different ways. Some people don't know where they're going to be. We know that our children, as they walk across the street now, we're going to have to watch them go on the bus. It's been kind of fun. I was watching that yesterday when Brian came out of school, and you see the children going out of school in the new mud puddles, you know, and they're stomping. I think, I'm not going to see that anymore. Where are they going to play?
Another thing, and when they take the bus, how are they going to get to school if they miss the bus? We have 1 car now. Now we're going to have to buy another car.
Closing schools in St. Louis Park has not only dramatically changed the Guasdens' lifestyle, it has affected the pocketbooks of those who no longer have children in the school system. More than 10% of the district's population is over 65. The number of school kids is declining faster here than in any other Twin City district. Yet these taxpayers, whose children have outgrown the system, are being asked to support schools with the highest operating cost in the area. It's a dilemma that has left the district no choice but to pull in its financial horns. There is another, less publicized side to this space oddity in our schools. There are a few districts where the growth rate is so high it's almost beyond comprehension. And like enrollment decline, Dave, rapid growth can also cause a serious financial squeeze, and we'll see that in a district in Rosemount tomorrow night.
Good. We'll be looking forward. Thank you, Steve. Milwaukee, past 2 nights, we have presented a special series of reports on the dilemma of declining school enrollment. The series, produced by WCCO Steve Johnson and photographer Doug Nemenick, has shown the trauma of school closings and teacher terminations. Tonight, part 3 of what we call Schools, a Space Oddity.
Dave, there is another variation of that space oddity in our schools, one that, with all the school closing headlines, has rarely been noticed. It is at the other end of the enrollment spectrum, in districts where rapid growth is causing a similar financial squeeze.
You can see actually a field that was harvested this past fall for corn, and there's some houses going up in its place this spring. I say homes go up like tulips in the spring around here, and that's exactly the way it is.
The Apple Valley Rosemount School District is growing at a rate of 7 to 10% a year. That's 800 to 1,000 new children in the school system each fall. It's a phenomenon that makes one think the post-war baby boom hasn't disappeared. It's just all moved to Apple Valley. And as homes sprout up, an estimated 1 house per day, in fact, the school district has tried to stay one step ahead by strategically locating new schools smack dab in the middle of new population centers. It has built or remodeled 12 schools since 1970, including an $8 million senior high that is considered a model for space-age education. It, too, is nearing capacity. Superintendent John Bristol admits he has grand designs for the district. His problem is unique, one of a half-dozen districts in the state suffering severe growing pains. But earlier this year, his plans ran amok when taxpayers overwhelmingly rejected a $14 million bond issue, which would have given the district yet another school complex.
We don't have solutions for what is happening. By voting against the bond issue, the public did not stop the homes from going up. It didn't stop the population from growing. It merely removed from us the option of providing facilities we're going to need for that growth.
Even while experiencing rapid growth, Apple Valley Rosemount has been preparing for that inevitable decline, perhaps 10 years down the road. Schools are built with flexibility, buildings that can easily be converted to doctors' offices, even supermarkets if necessary. Bristol calls them the state's most saleable schoolhouses. Apple Valley had adopted a middle school program, lumping grades 5 through 9 in one building, long before declining districts like St. Louis Park began thinking about it.
But we're building options in today which we'll be able to exercise tomorrow, whenever tomorrow arrives. So we're not projecting tomorrow yet, but we're planning for it.
But Bristol's grand design for Apple Valley has had strong opposition from taxpayers in his own district, and particularly from legislators and state education experts.
I'm not denying that Rosemount needs more facility. My question, and I've asked it to John Bristol before, does it have to be in that box, that square, so many square miles?
Are you talking about busing children out of the district to other districts, cross-line busing?
Yeah, what's sacred?
We don't put all our money into busing. I'd prefer to put it in the educational program so that an end product comes out. You don't get anything with buses but fumes and some raw metal from every 8 years. That's not where we ought to be investing our educational dollars.
Bristol argues that his district is simply being ignored by the state, that most legislators simply don't believe his growth problems exist, and he insists that without more state aid, he'll be out of business by 1978. There simply will be more children than there are classrooms in Apple Valley. Currently, there are 2 education funding bills under consideration in a Senate-House Conference Committee. They are similar in dollar value, but dissimilar in their approach to the district's money problems. And Dave, in our final report tomorrow night, will examine how the legislature is and is not dealing with that dilemma.
We have a footnote to your report tonight that massive school district reorganization bill in the legislature now has been given up for dead. The chief author of the bill, Senator Gerald Anderson of North Branch, says he has decided to include planning funds and a voluntary pairing plan in that omnibus school aids bill. In just a moment, Al Austin will come. For the past 3 nights on the scene tonight, WCCO Steve Johnson and photographer Doug Nemenick have presented a special series of reports on the crisis in our schools, brought on principally by the phenomenon of declining enrollment. Tonight, Steve concludes the reports with a study of legislative efforts to attack the problem. Here now is part 4 of Schools, a Space Oddity.
Dave, there isn't a school district in the state that can confidently say today that it will be able to meet its obligations tomorrow. There are deep-rooted money troubles that have been solved in the interim with school closings and teacher terminations, but the long-term solution lies elsewhere.
These next 5 years are going to be very difficult in the transfer. We're going to have to find a new way of supporting education. The per-pupil unit method, in my estimation, is no longer a viable option. I question whether there's even enough money in this whole state to continue educating the way we have.
Yet state legislators are in the midst of hammering out the single largest funding bill in state history, an education aid package clearly equaling 1/4 of the entire state budget. But it appears that even $1.7 billion will not be enough.
We're going to have to spend more money to educate kids in the future than we do now, or we're not going to do any better job of educating them. And perhaps if we continue the kinds of cuts we're having right now, we're going to do a poorer job of it.
Teacher and parent organizations have been the most active lobbies at the Capitol, pressing to preserve the jobs of 1,000 teachers put on unrequested leave this spring, and to sustain the programs those teachers represent. Many teachers will be rehired after the legislative appropriations are made, but most will not. Richfield music teacher Paige Macklin, whom we met on Monday, with 7 years' experience in the system, will be out of work next fall, and her elementary music program will not be restored. In St. Louis Park, where the closing of Elliott School this year tore the school's neighborhood apart, the district faces yet another school closing in another neighborhood next year, and another the year after that. More money from state coffers also won't directly deal with the severe growing pains felt in districts like Apple Valley Rosemount, where a yearly 10% population rise is outstripping the district's ability to build new schools. Apple Valley will likely get proportionately less money than it's had in the past, with the funding bill under consideration. Its problems will continue to multiply for nearly a decade. Consolidation is little more than a dirty word to most parents and school administrators. But slowly, the realities of educational financing in the 70s and 80s is forcing a change in heart. North St. Paul School District is dealing with its declining enrollment struggle by leasing Hillside Junior High to neighboring Stillwater. Stillwater has a major growth problem, much like Apple Valley. So next fall, the entire 10th grade will be bused 20 miles to North St. Paul, utilizing an otherwise vacant building. It has become clear to educators and legislators alike that the plans laid in the early 70s to equalize the financial burden of teaching children have fallen victim to an unpredicted oddity in education. Monuments we've built symbolizing our attempts to achieve educational excellence now stand as silent reminders of what we must do today to educate the children of tomorrow.
Can you find a word or a phrase that would generally characterize the outlook of educators and administrators? What is their collective feeling about this situation?
I think right now they're frustrated. Frustrated because they've been hit with declining enrollment. They haven't been given the tools nor the money to deal with it. At the same time, there's been rapid inflation. All of these things have served to frustrate them, and they haven't had the ability to get the legislature to begin thinking about innovative new ways of examining how we're financing schools and the educational system. So I think the future is in some other area, as Dr. Casey indicated.
Certainly not one of optimism.
No, I don't think.
But they haven't given up the ghost.
No, I don't think they've given up. They're certainly going to try, and they're trying as best they can. But as Dr. Casey said, more money is not the ultimate solution, and 10 years down the road, we have to start thinking of other ways of dealing with financing education.
Al Austin has been following the series closely. He has some editorial thoughts.
Sad story, the emasculation of Minnesota's most prized asset, its schools. Sad that we didn't see it coming and plan for it when the population quit exploding and started fidgeting around instead. Sad that it's going to get worse, and we still aren't planning for it very much. No very happy ending is going to come along. Some things may help. The legislature next year should be ready with a new formula to spread the misery around more evenly, perhaps one based more on school programs and less on numbers of pupils. A pair of measures before the legislature this year could ease the problem of declining enrollments, forcing the layoff of all the new teachers, leaving only the older, highest salaried teachers. These measures would encourage the older teachers to take long leaves of absence or early retirement, or to teach only part-time. Schools need continuous infusions of young blood in their teaching ranks. Deeper cuts can be made at the administrative level and into athletic programs. And we should all brace ourselves for a Dear John, for the end of our love affair with the neighborhood school. In some places, the end of the community school. It's been great, but it's a luxury we can no longer afford if we're to prevent further bloating of the pupil-to-teacher ratio, and if we're to avoid losing for our children, little by little, art instruction, music, help for the learning disabled, until there is not much education left in our schools.
Dave? If you have any thoughts on Al's comments, or if you'd care to share your feelings about Steve's series of reports, we ask that you address your comments to feedback, WCCO Television 55402. In a moment.